Thanks, guys. Yeah, I'm Jason Sirocco. I work for a company called Entrust Datacard, and we've been in the security business for a long time. Matt Rose, an SE from our company, he'll be showing you a demonstration of our offering in a short bit. We've been around for a long time. We're basically, our core strength is PKI. We were the very first commercial implementation of PKI back in '94. But we also have an authentication platform with a very wide range of authenticators. I think we're up to 17 right now, Matt?
Yep.
Thanks. Yeah, and one of the authenticators that we're going to show you today that's of interest to banking customers and all kinds of other things, of course, is soft token. We all know about the one-time password off of a mobile application. And we're going to show you the next step of it in terms of how we're implementing it, which is great. Basically gives you the ability to stay within your native banking app and basically use the OTP app without having to get out, which is something that's great. It's something that I've been wanting to show customers and show at demonstrations for a long time, and you're going to see our offering here. I think, is this the first time we've shown this demonstration? Yep. Right. So let's talk about why soft tokens. I'm sure many of you in the room are really familiar with soft tokens, of course, especially with that standard. You're working on your desktop PC, you have your mobile app beside you, you plug in an OTP, a one-time password, and you're authenticated, and that's great. One of the things about why I think soft token, even though there are technically stronger authenticators out there, one of the reasons why soft tokens are used is because they're at a lower price point, but they are offering you a significant amount of security compared to, say, SMS, or definitely way more than something like a single-factor authentication. So it's in the sweet spot because of that price point that it's at. But one of the trends that we're seeing is, of course, people aren't just using desktop operating systems. They're using mobile devices to do both their, whatever it is they're doing, their banking, whatever it happens to be, as well as it's their authenticator as well. The soft token app, sitting alone, kind of has a lousy user experience because you have to go out of your native app and into the authenticating app, get your OTP, do a copy-paste. Matt will be showing you that traditional model. And that's not great. And it's been years now where whenever I've shown a soft token app to potential customers, they always say, hey, can I get a better user experience? One of the things that has changed, one of the trends that have changed is the people who are offering up mobile operating systems, iOS, Android, etc., they've started to allow, and this has been after many years, they've started to allow app-to-app basically communication between the applications. It's taken them a long time to figure out how to do it securely. Obviously, because anytime you open up any kind of communication channel between two apps, you get into man-in-the-middle issues. There's some sort of memory space that could be looked at. There's umpteen number of security problems, but they've solved a lot of these problems, and you're starting to see those capabilities now being opened up and offered to developers. So, let's just rewind the tape a little bit and go back to classic OTP authentication. I'm not even going to go through all the steps, but the disadvantages are very, very clear. And don't forget, we are talking about the scenarios, user case scenarios where you're actually using an application, your native banking application on one app, and actually needing to go into a secondary app to get your OTP. This is painful. The number of steps you have to go through is pretty substantial. There are solutions for this. So push authentication is out there. It's an offering that we have. The problem with it, of course, is that whenever you're starting to get into asynchronous authentications, it starts to fall apart. And for those of you who know what I'm talking about, that kind of disqualifies push authentication as being a real solution for that specific problem of that user interface. Probably the holy grail of how to solve this is to actually integrate our soft token app SDK into your own app. Problem, of course, being speed to market can be a real problem. If you're a small company, if you're not a big bank, if you're just a small company, there's a significant amount of development effort that's needed to actually embed the SDK and therefore put the OTP app into your own native app. Cordova plugins are coming. That's great. course, there's still a lot of development needed. And I mean, you could come to my booth and we could have a chat about HTML5. I'm not completely convinced yet about HTML5 and security, but that's just an opinion. So where we are today is inter-app authentication, meaning you can stay in your native application, access the OTP app, do what it needs to do, and then bring the user right back into the native app without ever the user having to do anything other than simply authenticate. We're going to show a demo of that right now.
Sure. Okay. So we have a little app we call our AnyBank, and essentially what I'm doing is just logging into my bank account with my credentials, and I'm going to show the classic way of doing two-factor authentication. So I'm going to put my username and password in, basically, and then I'm going to be prompted for my one-time password, and I'm going to go grab that from my soft token. You might remember the old hard tokens you had around your keychain. Taken that technology, put it into a soft client. I already have my cell phone, so we'll use that as my my mechanism to get that. So I'm just going to sign on here. So my username and password are validated. Now I'm going to go grab my one-time password. So I have to leave this application, open up the Entrust soft client, soft token. We have a pin on there. Let me just put the pin in. And there's my 8-digit code now to copy, paste, either write down and grab that as my second factor authentication. So I'm just going to copy that to clipboard. I'm going to go back now to the application and paste this in and authenticate. So now I've proven my identity. I use two-factor authentication to get in. I wish my bank account was like that.
So just to pause you there for a second, Matt, for those of you keeping score, that's the old way of doing things, and that's what we've had to show for years and years before interoperability. And for those of you who are security-minded, if you were keeping score of the number of security issues that are even involved, just with the shared memory space, there's at least 4 or 5 major problems with doing that specific scenario. So we're happy to show you finally the new way to do things.
So I just flipped it on there real quick. This is just to enable the functionality. I'm going to do the same process as before. Again, my bank card and password, so username and password, signing in. I'm going to be prompted again for two-factor authentication. So this way, it's just a matter of clicks now. So I'm going to be prompted for my authentication. I need to prove my identity. I click my button here, automatically transferred to my soft token. I have my OTP here, my one-time password comes up. I've sent my certification over to my app, so I know who I am. And now I'm going to confirm that transaction. And then the app now is responding back to it, and I'm logged in. So I'm not flipping back and forth from application to application. It's a little bit more seamless on that front. What I'll show too is one of the staples is VPN access. We provide second factor authentication for VPN. So we have a VPN client. Traditional way, you log in with username and password. Again, prompt for second factor authentication. So I'll just go through the process. I'm going to enter my username and password. We try to be passwordless and use our soft token to really give the second factor authentication. So I'm going to connect. Again, same process here again. I'm going to authenticate to the application. It's pushing my identity to the applet. And this time it's my Entrust VPN. My identity comes up, so I don't have to worry about what code I need to do or copy and paste. I'm going to confirm that transaction, and I flip back, and now I'm connected back to VPN. Fairly straightforward.
That's great. All right. I think for those of you in the room, we do have a little bit of time. It might be worth taking a look, Matt, at what the code looks like in order to interact. Because as I said earlier, basically, if you're a larger organization, you do have development team available to you. Actually embedding the SDK into your apps is probably what you're going to want to do. If you don't have that ability, you want to bring something to market quickly. I think what Matt's going to talk about in a moment here is really just how quickly a very small development team can implement this very basic code in order to have this app interoperability. Again, it's just all about getting the sweet spot of trying to use that beautiful soft token app, which is at a great price point, and actually implement it in a way that it's not going to cost you a lot of money. I think we're finally reaching that ground now.
Yeah, so being a developer conference, we wanted to show a little bit of code. So essentially, what we're doing here is on our banking app, we're just calling a URL to fetch the OTP. So essentially, it's one line of code that runs the fetch OTP, and then we're sending the serial number for my identity, so I know which one to pull up on my soft token. And then what we're doing was we're just finding out if I can open that URL, and if it does, then open that application up and pass my credentials, my identity off to the soft token so that I can get my one-time password from the application. And then on the other side, we're using our Entrust soft token SDK so we can modify this. And what I'm doing now is once I get that interaction back from our any bank application, I'm going to do a fetch OTP. So I'm going to grab my one-time password, that 8-digit code, bottle it up, and send it back to the callback application. And then the callback application is then just going to take that, parse that one-time password, that string OTP, equal to OTP, and put it in the right coordinates so that now I can validate and authenticate to my banking application. So it's it's only really, we show a little bit more with sort of the functions. So it's only really about 5 lines of code that we need to do to interact with this. The other thing we can do too is we also can not just do login, we can do transfers. So if we were transferring a sum of monies, $10,000 or more, for instance, we can also do prompt a user to authenticate that, to verify that transaction. So it's one of the other mechanisms that we can use this application for.
That's great. So for any of you, again, who are curious about more of the security or the trustworthiness of some of this that's going on, it's one of the conversations we were having just earlier, Matt, was about how we're now able to harden, we're also able to harden the actual token as it's being interop between the two applications, which is not something that we had before as well. Before we were basically just crossing our fingers, and now it's finally, we have a way of hardening that right across between the two applications. So kudos to the mobile operating system manufacturers, Android, iOS, et cetera. I think that we're heading in the right direction for implementing technology such as this. So with a minute and a bit left, I think that's it for our program.
Thank you.
Thanks.